So when I was growing up, I had a really optimistic perspective about work. And a lot of it came from visiting my dad at his job. Now, my dad worked at a bank, and he was the assistant branch manager. And when I say bank, I don't mean one of those fast foody looking with the gray windows, a smoky glass banks. I mean a 1920s style, big, imposing bank with marble floors, big oak tables, and they had a vault in this bank. The vault was 8 feet wide and 3 feet thick, and it had that big turny thing on the front. I was told that there were millions of dollars in this vault. And so my father was, in essence, safeguarding all of this money. It was important work. Growing up, I also watched a lot of television, and I mean a lot of television. And my favorite show as a kid, if you're old enough to remember, in the 1970s, was the Mary Tyler Moore Show. You remember that show? It was a show about a professional woman at work. And Mary had a really important job. She and Murray and Mr. Grand, they had to put out the news. Critical work. It was so important that once Mary even went to jail for failing to reveal her source. But my favorite part of the Mary Tyler Moore Show came at the end, when we would see this. Do you remember this? This was Mary's power stamp. Because what this meant was that Mary Tyler Moore wasn't just the star of the show. She owned the show. She owned her own television show. I didn't even know what that meant, but I knew it was a really big deal. And so you can imagine, as a kid, I'm thinking, one day I'm gonna join this amazing adult world of work where people have millions of dollars piled up in vaults, where women own their own television show. It's gonna be so awesome. Flash forward. 2 weeks ago, I'm on a flight to New York. The plane lands. I'm at the front of the plane. I stand up and I look down the aisle at the rows and rows of business people. And I see 150 of what appear to be the most successful, miserable-looking people that you have ever seen in your life. And I'm looking at them, and my mind flashes back to my dreams as a kid, and I thought, but what about my dad? What about Mary Tyler Moore? These people don't look that excited about their jobs. And so I got to thinking about it, and I thought, was I just delusional as a kid, or is something actually wrong with work? The data tells us that something is in essence wrong with work. We've seen the Gallup numbers. They're the worst they've ever been. 51% of people are not emotionally engaged in their jobs. So look at the person next to you right now. Go ahead. Chances are at least one of you hates your job. And the challenge we have with this 51% number is we treat it like it's some business statistic, like ROI or market share, but it's not. It's 51% of people, over half of the real life human beings walking around on this earth, spend their days doing something that they don't care about. I am not okay with this. I do not think that any of us should in any way, shape, or form be okay with this. So I got a glimpse at how to solve this problem, and it happened 8 years ago. I'm a sales leadership consultant, and a large pharmaceutical company had engaged me and a number of other consultants, and the challenge was they wanted us to study their sales force and figure out how to create best-in-class salespeople. But the way that they went about it was really kind of interesting. They said, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna give you a group of salespeople to study, and in your group, there are some top performers, and then there's a whole bunch of other people. but we're not going to tell you who's who. What we want you to do is we want you to go in the field, work with these people, observe them, make sales calls with them, and see if you can figure out who the top performers are and why. And so out in the field we went. And it was near the end of the study. I was with a representative in Phoenix, Arizona, and she was dropping me off at the airport. And we had a couple of extra minutes, so I asked her a question that I hadn't asked anyone else. I said, "What do you think about when you go on sales calls?" And I will never forget her answer. She said, "I always think about this one patient." She said, "I was standing in a doctor's office one day waiting to speak to the doctor, and I had on my name badge with the drug company logo on it. And this little old lady came up to me and said, 'Excuse me, miss, do you work for that drug company?' She said, I looked down at her and said, 'Yes, ma'am, I do.' She said, the little old lady looked up at me and said, 'Well, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for giving me my life back. Because prior to taking this drug, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. But now that I have this drug that your company makes, I can get on a plane. I can fly across the country. I can visit my grandkids. I can get down on the floor and play with them. So thank you for giving me my life back.'" And as she's telling me this story, she's getting really emotional. And I found myself getting emotional listening to her. And she went on and she said, "That grandmother, that is my higher purpose. I think about her every single day." She said, "If it's a rainy Friday afternoon, I'm having a bad day, all the other sales reps go home. I don't. I stay and I make the extra sales call because I think about her." That conversation for me was transformational. So I went back to the transcripts of all the other interviews, of all the representatives we'd been with, and I was looking for this thing that I now call noble purpose. And I found it. I found it in the representative who said, "My father was a doctor. That is a harder job than anybody can ever imagine. I just want to make the doctor's life better." I found it in the representative who said, "I am passionate about science. I love going into people's offices and sharing science." All told, I found 5 people who alluded to this sense of higher purpose. And at the end of the study, the pharmaceutical company said, "Lisa, who do you think our top representatives are?" And I said, "These 5. And I was 100% right. And that one representative who had spoken in such an emotionally engaging way about that grandmother, she was the #1 representative in the country for 3 years in a row. I knew at that moment that I had found my life's work. And so I spent the next several years studying this across a number of organizations, different job functions, even in different countries. And the results could not be more clear. Salespeople who sell with a sense of noble purpose, who truly want to make a difference in the lives of their customers, outsell salespeople who are just focused on sales quotas and targets. Organizations that have a declarative, noble purpose, who make improving their customers' lives the centerpiece of their strategy, who have a customer-focused purpose, outperform organizations that have a profit-focused purpose. So we've got to get really clear on this. Purpose drives profit. It's not the other way around. But you see, we get mixed up sometimes about this. You know, I work with a lot of executives who are very bottom line oriented, and I do this exercise with them to show them just how emotionally engaging a sense of purpose is. Think about this. As I talk you through this, imagine what the people in your company would say to this. So the first thing I ask them is I say, turn to the person next to you and describe what you do for a living. And we tend to get answers like, I'm the CFO, I'm the CEO, I run a software company. We get these role-specific answers. But then I ask them, I say, now, I want you to turn to that same person and I want you to describe a time when you made a difference to someone at work. And the whole conversation changes. Their faces light up. They describe a time when they went the extra mile for a customer. They describe a time when they stayed late to help a colleague. The whole room lights up because in that moment, they are describing a time when they mattered, when they made a difference. In that moment, they are absolutely, passionately engaged in something bigger than themselves. So what does that mean for you? Do you need to quit your job? Go join the Peace Corps? Not today. Because what I'd like to suggest to you is that today, in this job that you have, whatever you may do, right now, there is a sense of meaning and purpose available to you. Whether you sell toothpaste or toothpicks or run an IT department, I would like to suggest to you that there is a noble purpose in your work. And so if you want to define and find your own noble purpose, if you want to have that sense of connection and meaning to your work, to know that every day you wake up and you do something that matters, there are 3 questions that you need to ask. And those 3 questions are, 1, how do you make a difference? How do you make a difference in the lives of your customers or your constituents? Number 2, how do you do it differently? How do you do it differently than anyone else? How do you do it differently than your competition? How do you do it differently than anyone else who's your peer? And number 3, on your best day, what do you love about your job? Because the reality is, every day at work is not going to be your best day. You're going to have days when your work is challenging, when your work is difficult. You're going to have that moment that we've all had, that moment when your flight is late, when your competition's won some business, when something goes wrong. And in that moment, no bonus or trophy or trip, none of those things are going to be enough for you to stay engaged. What you need at that moment is to remember that you make a difference, that your work matters, that your job matters, and that it has meaning. So when you encounter one of those moments at work, that's not the moment to shrink back. That is the moment when you have the opportunity to step up, engage with everything you've got, and claim your noble purpose. Thank you.